Caroline and everybody here, this is probably the most significant election of our lifetime. You know, we have said it every 4 years, but this here one is it. We are looking at an election that will take place in 122 days.
122.
Where on one side, you have the former president who is running to become president again, who has openly talked about his admiration of dictators and his intention to be a dictator on day one, who has openly talked about his intention to weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, who has talked about being proud of taking from the women of America a most fundamental right to make decisions about your own body. And then last week, understand, sadly, the press has not been covering it as much as they should in proportion to the seriousness of what just happened, when the United States Supreme Court essentially told this individual who has been convicted of 34 felonies that he will be immune from essentially the activity he has told us he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. Understand what we all know. In 122 days, we each have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in. Understand what we know. When there has been a full-on intentional attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. When I talk about the family that raised me, yes, they took me in a stroller as they were marching and shouting for justice, knowing that justice will not be achieved unless we are prepared to march and shout and fight for it. And one of the ways we do that is through our vote. This here election, let's think about the significance of the United States Supreme Court. 2 years ago and some days now, we commemorated a decision by the United States Supreme Court, the Dobbs decision, that undid the protections of Roe v. Wade. Understand how that happened. The former president, who wants to be president again, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. The Court of Thurgood and RBG took a most fundamental right, the right to make decisions about your own body. And on this subject, I think we all believe and know one does not have to abandon their faith and deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her priest or her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but the government should not be telling her what to do. Understand that the former president, who is up for re-election, has said he is proud of what has happened, proud of the fact that our daughters will have fewer rights than their grandmothers, that we have seen in state after state, they're passing laws punishing healthcare providers, in Texas providing for prison for life for a doctor or nurse who provides reproductive care. Understand, laws being passed and proposed that make no exception for rape or incest. Caroline, you asked me about the things that have influenced my career.
That's exactly right.
So many of you know I was a prosecutor. You may not know one of the reasons why. When I was in high school, I learned that my best friend was being molested by her stepfather. And when I learned, I said to her, you have to come live with us. I called up my mother. My mother said, of course she does. And she came and she lived with us.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided at a young age I wanted to take on what I could do to protect women and children against violence. The idea that these so-called leaders would be passing laws that make no exception for rape and incest, that are essentially telling a survivor of a crime of violence to their body, a violation of their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, that's immoral. And that's what's happening in our country right now. You look at the taking of fundamental freedoms and rights. In Georgia, passed a law to deny people and make it more difficult to have freedom to access to the ballot. Passed a law that makes it illegal to essentially give people food and water for standing in line to vote. The hypocrisy abounds. What happened to love thy neighbor?
So
look at what they're doing.
I want to pick that up.
And all of this is at stake.
Yes.